Joining me is the opposition leader, Peter Dutton. Thank you for your time. You've had the race card played against you.
Thanks, Henry.
Are you a racist?
No, of course not. Complete opposite of a racist, and I think my track record demonstrates that for many, many years. As Immigration Minister, as Home Affairs Minister, I brought in people on a non-discriminatory basis, but they were people who were, I believe, going to do the right thing by our country. And all I'm advocating for here is a program, a migration program that's going to work in our best interests, in our national interest, and I'm not going to shy away from that. The left can throw all sorts of tags and try and distract as they do, but they can't argue the substance, the substantive issue here. And the Prime Minister can't deny the fact that he's changed his policy to allow people into our country who can be sympathisers of a listed terrorist organisation.
It's interesting, that last point. The whole cat was let out of the bag on Sunday by the ASIO boss, Mike Burgess, who just blurted out, yes, that is what we're doing. The Prime Minister today refused to deny that it is what we're doing. He refused to deny that he wanted this to happen. Is Mike Burgess on a frolic of his own? Is this his assessment, letting people who are terrorist Hamas supporters? Or do you think it comes from the Prime Minister?
Well, Andrew, I think Mike Burgess is a first-class public servant. I appointed him when I was Minister for Home Affairs to be the Director-General of ASIO, and he serves his country with great distinction. But he can only act within the law and within the direction given to him by the government. The government has taken a policy change and they've implemented a very radical change, that is that they will allow people in who are sympathisers with a terrorist organisation that has just committed the greatest atrocity against people of Jewish faith since the Holocaust, where 6 million people were gassed. That is a very radical departure, never explained to the Australian public before the last election. And I don't think the Prime Minister's got the first clue when it comes to how to make tough decisions and how to make decisions that are appropriate and right for our country when it comes to national security.
Well, I tell you what, he didn't seem to have much clue about, or maybe it was deliberate, which I rather suspect. The Prime Minister today misquoted that ASIO boss, Mike Burgess, to falsely imply that ASIO was checking all the Palestinian refugees coming here. I've shown the grabs, I've made clear that there was a deceit here, or at least a misquotation. In your opinion, was that misquoting by Albanese of the ASIO boss accidental or deliberate?
There's no doubt in my mind that it was a deliberate misquoting because, Andrew, sometimes you can read a quote from somebody and you can take 3 out of 5 sentences, leave out the first and leave out the last or whatever it might be, but you're providing a full quote and a direct quote of what somebody has said. But what the PM did here was he read out a sentence but excluded part of that sentence, and he skipped over the words which gave the qualification that Mike Burgess gave during his interview on the weekend. And by doing that, the Prime Minister made Mike Burgess's words look like they were supporting the position that the Prime Minister gave in question time yesterday. That is, that ASIO was checking every person who came through this process. And I think it was a deliberate step. It meant that the Prime Minister had an opportunity to clarify it in Parliament today. He refused to do that. I've never seen somebody in that chair as Prime Minister be accused of deliberately misleading the Parliament in my 20-odd years in this Parliament. And it's without precedent that the Prime Minister of the day wouldn't be standing up and fiercely defending his or her position. So I think the Prime Minister has an open and shut case against him here, and it is probably the most serious case that you can make against a sitting member of Parliament is that they've deliberately misled the Parliament, but that is exactly what the Prime Minister has done.
Well, if it was an accident, of course, you'd straight up stand up and say, look, I'm sorry, blah, blah. You know, it was an accident and all done. But to not correct the record, I found...
But he could have done that today and he didn't. He just didn't do it. That's exactly right.
He had 2 opportunities and he didn't. I know. So but what can you do about it? I mean, he flaunts all the traditions of Parliament, all the unwritten rules. He just gets away with it. He walks out of the building whistling. What are you going to do about it?
Well, with the Teal candidates now, and when you've got these green Teals like Zali Steggall and like Monique Ryan and others, they just sign up to whatever the Labor Party puts forward. So they have supported the changes to the standing orders, which means that the Prime Minister didn't have to stand up and provide an account for his actions today. And I think as people are realising now, a vote for these Teals is a vote for Anthony Albanese and a vote for a minority government. We need to get our country back on track. We need to make the decisions necessary in a very precarious period to keep our country safe. We need to make sure that we can make the economic decisions that the government's just not capable of making, so that we can help families pay their electricity bills, make sure that they can run their household budgets, make sure that their businesses can remain viable. This is a Whitlam government, and it's slowly destroying and strangling the Australian economy. And now they're making decisions. I mean, it's quite remarkable that you had Andrew Giles. Don't forget, he was the minister who was in charge at the time. Not only did he make the decision to release 152 people from immigration detention when he didn't need to, and these people have gone on in some cases to commit criminal offences, but now we know that it's Andrew Giles who brought in 1,300 people from the Gaza area controlled by the listed terrorist organisation Hamas. He brought them in on tourist visas, and that there were no face-to-face interviews with some of these people. They weren't even asked whether they were Hamas sympathisers. So we don't know who's come to our country. Almost 500 people have now claimed protection. So we know what the court system's like in this country. It'd be like allowing boats to arrive in Australia, and then we can work out whether you're an asylum seeker or not. We don't do it with boats because once you get into the court system here, you're likely never to leave, and so we end up with people becoming Australian citizens, some of whom I'm sure are first-class people, but others we don't know anything about.
It's extraordinary. The whole thing is just so extraordinary to me. But here we go. You've been accused. It's a very serious accusation by Muslim groups, by Labor, etc., of raising tensions, of raising divisions by raising this issue, by temporarily saying we should temporarily ban all refugees from Gaza. And they say, well, look, you're making all Palestinians suspect, you're stoking up the tensions, you could even cause who knows what from parts of the community. Do you think that's a fair criticism? Have you been careful enough with your words?
Well, Andrew, we live in a democracy and we can express our view. I'm an elected member of Parliament and I'm the leader of our party, the opposition and the alternate government for our country. I'm going to hold the government to account and I'm going to speak up very strongly for what I believe is in our country's best interests. When Tony Abbott and I brought people in from Syria, we didn't bring them in without face-to-face interviews. We didn't land them in Australia and then decide whether or not they were a sympathiser with Al-Qaeda or ISIL. We took people from Syria into Jordan, into Oman, into North Iraq, and we conducted interviews. We took biometrics from these people. We tested it with our Five Eyes partners, including the United States. Anybody who pinged, anybody who was a suspected terrorist never came to our country. And we landed those people here successfully. They've become amazing Australians. How am I racist when I did that? And people were brought in regardless of their religion, regardless of who they were, but they were escaping persecution and they were escaping the clutches, particularly for the Yazidi women who had been raped and tortured by ISIL. They escaped and we brought them here. So I'm just not going to cop a lecture from hypocrites and I'm not going to be silenced. And I don't think any Australian should be silenced because, you know, the extreme left in this country, the Greens and some extremists within different communities here call you a racist and therefore you sort of sheepishly go into the background. I'm not a racist and I'm not going to be standing here as a punching bag for people like Zali Steggall or people with extreme views otherwise. Zali Steggall is a hard Green. She votes with the Labor Party almost every occasion. And if you vote for Zali Steggall at the election, you'll get Anthony Albanese. So let's be very clear about this. It's not increasing tensions or stoking tensions. I actually think, ironically, that them calling out people unnecessarily and unrealistically and unjustly as racists, they're actually fueling tensions. I kept our country safe as Home Affairs Minister and as the Immigration Minister because I enforced the rule of law. I brought people here in significant numbers who are going to do the right thing by our country. And I'm not going to take a morals lecture from Anthony Albanese and his fellow travellers like the Greens on an issue which is so important to our country.
Peter Dutton, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. Take care, mate. Thank you.